Nikola Jokic was born on the 19th of November, 1995 in a small town in Serbia called Sombor. And here I must tell you right away, the story of Nikola, his family, upbringing, and coming to basketball in principle will finally be different from those stories that we are usually used to hearing about players who grew up somewhere across the ocean. First, the family. It was so simple that each of us can imagine it in principle to ourselves, because 90% of us grew up in such post-Soviet families. A poor life, but in which there is always something to eat in the refrigerator. An ordinary one-bedroom apartment with no frills, and mom and dad are engineers working at ordinary jobs. Agree, the thing is familiar, and that's exactly in such conditions, that's what surrounded Nikola in his childhood years. Yes, there is a small note. The Joker was the youngest child in the family. The other two brothers, Mania and Fear, were ahead of Nikola in age by 11 to 13 years, respectively. And a huge number of funny stories will be connected with this later, but for now let's go back to young Jokic. In fact, we know very little about youth from the point of view of basketball. The older brothers, since they had a pretty big size by the time of Nikola's adolescence, were already playing basketball. The fear of defeat was completely lit up in a couple of professional teams in Europe, and many scouts even predicted a good sporting future for him. But Nikola was not going to blindly follow in the footsteps of his brothers. In general, our hero of today was initially fond of only one sport, and which, if not for basketball, as he would later admit himself, would definitely have become, and most likely definitely become, his hobby for many years to come. Do you know what kind of sport it was? Equestrian. Yes, it's hard to believe it or imagine Nikola sitting on a horse, but Jokic has simply adored horses since childhood and has been fascinated by them for a long time. However, at the age of 7, parents notice that the youngest son is getting stronger and growing beyond his years, and his craving for a basketball begins to increase every day. In many ways, this happened again because of the brothers, who were always encouraging the little one to play an American, then 3-on-3, then a goat. And in short, Dad decides to take his youngest son to the gym. At first, as Nikola recalls, he absolutely did not like this idea and did not want to do basketball professionally in any way. Of course not, he certainly liked the game itself, he loved watching it, watching his older brothers play it, and he himself enjoyed sending balls to the basket. But in order to exhaust himself with loads, running around and developing some skills, No, I didn't want that. However, the brothers and Dad insisted on their own, so that he tried to work out, and then, as they say, it started. But rushed where? You ask, where are the statistics? Where are the games? Where is there any more or less detailed information about the boys' school years? The answer is simple, it is not there. Largely due to the fact that Nikola Jokic in his youth did not look like a muscular lump of aggression flying over the ring and did not rail according to statistics, the scout did not give a damn about this kid, while the game itself, as it turns out later, seemed to them quite good, and most importantly, that it was at that moment that the basic skills were laid, thanks to which Jokic would later conquer everyone in the NBA so much. His basketball IQ, the ability to pass passes, play in any position, not just in the post. In short, Nikola Jokic started his career unexpectedly in the position of practically a point guard, a fat point guard, as he himself would joke later, and that in the future would certainly help him a lot. If anything, his whole game was that he came to someone else's half somewhere, got up mostly on the arc and stupidly handed out passes. That's it. But then a logical question arises, but then how did he get noticed in all such gaming circumstances, and who invited him, most importantly, to then buy as a result? And from this moment, gentlemen, begins, in my opinion, all the most interesting. How many wonderful accidents have we seen in all the stories I have told, which in many ways saved, rehabilitated or launched entire careers in the NBA? A huge variety. So here, too, everything is not complete without a small miracle. It was an ordinary Sunday morning, which a scout named Mishko Rosnadovic spent in routine affairs, trying to calculate and find new basketball talents in the vastness of Serbia. At one point, flipping through the newspaper, he notices that a certain young man named Nikola Jokic in the youth team of Vojvodina is holding a match with 25 points and 25 rebounds, and his plus or minus rating is 50. To say that it struck the bear then is to say nothing. However, being an experienced scout, he waits a week to see what this previously unknown young man of mine will do in the next duel. In general, the next Sunday morning comes. Raznatovic opens a new newspaper with interest and looks for Nikola's name there with impatience and unexpectedly discovers a match with 19 points and 20 rebounds from him, after which the understanding finally comes that it seems he discovered a new basketball talent for himself by accident, which immediately needs to be grabbed. Having dialed Branimir Tadic, who at one time signed Marjanovic and Pegovic to their agency, Mishka asks to find out more about this player named Nikola Jokic, who prepares a report for him. This, I must say, was the second moment when Mishka Raznatovic was surprised. According to his assumptions, Rasputin is gaining so many rebounds, he had to be athletic, tall, and in general his whole game had to be built exclusively from outstanding physics and anthropometry. But it was impossible to imagine his surprise when he read that it was a short, obese, and slow schoolboy. Although if many saw this as an obstacle, then the scout, on the contrary, called Tadic back and said that with such data, the boy is 100% a talent, because he clearly uses something other than physics to achieve such high stats, which means leaving him unattended would be an unforgivable mistake. Thus, by the evening, the Armored World flies out to the New Garden, where the youthful Tim Vovoin was based, in order to sign the guy for himself. And this was the third moment when Nikola surprises everyone. Firstly, upon arrival, the agent understands that the kid turns 18 today or tomorrow, and secondly, that he generally plays for nothing. Thirdly, he has no contract with the youth team, let alone with an adult, which means there should be no problems with signing. And actually, that's what happens. Nikola does not hesitate to sign an agreement, and after a few days she finds herself in a team called Mega, from where Nikola Jokic's adult basketball career starts. Before we continue to consider Nikola's adult basketball career, first let me explain to you a little bit why he came to Mega in general and what was the goal of those scouts who noticed the guy. Mega Vizura. This is the basketball club of one of the most influential and main sports agencies in Europe called BuBasket. For many years of the club's existence, he has brought up not a single good player for NBA. Goga Bitadze, Boban Marjanovic, Ivica Zuba and many others were raised and prepared for the league in this place, as Samson Ruzantsev is preparing now, for example. But the most important thing here is that we should know with you that the BuBasket belongs to Mishka Raznatovic, the very person who found Nikola in the newspaper. So his path in Europe was, in fact, originally predetermined. And it wasn't bad. But what awaited Nikola as soon as he moved to a new club for himself? Let's start with perhaps the most pleasant, the main team and training with it. It may even surprise you a little, but before his 17th birthday it just so happened that Nikola had never played for big and adult teams, and even more so the attitude towards him was always dismissive, most often because of his appearance. But here everything was completely different. However, the joys of this personally ended for Jokic, as training came into play. Heavy, exhausting and very often unbearable. Upon arrival at the new team, the Mega physical training coach was shocked by how loose and weak the kid joined their ranks. He couldn't do push-ups off the floor even once, weighed under 120 kilograms, barely ran and didn't look like some kind of future basketball star at all. The only thing that pleased me was that Nikola himself never refused even the most difficult exercises, did not give up and finished everything to the end. Part of the reason for this sporting behavior was a Nikola's desire to start playing as soon as possible, and for the first 15 days, if anything, he was not allowed to play at all, fearing that he would simply injure himself with such physical activity, and that his older brother Strahini controlled Nikola's behavior and motivation. What did you understand? Raznatovic said several times afterwards that he was discouraged by the great sacrifice his brother made for the sake of Nikola's career, because as soon as he found out that the little one was being signed to a new club, he immediately abandoned his basketball career, moved with his brother to Belgrade and was always by his side. In many ways, he and Dan Milovic were the ones who taught Nikola to start the day with 2 liters of Coca-Cola and a healthy Burek, which he adored and which in many ways allowed at least a little, but to bring the kid into athletic shape. Now what was Nikola's debut year in terms of statistics? The Joker devotes the entire 12-13 season to working on his body and, in fact, all the matches that he played were exclusively for the youth team. Only in 5 fights at the age of 17, he will run in the Serbian Championship, gaining 1 and 8 points and 2 rebounds on average in 10 minutes, on which Rocky Sison will be finished for him. A little weak, you say, and in part, you will probably be right. However, already in the year following for his aspiration and work, the coach allows our hero to play much more as a basis. Already in 25 matches of the Adriatic League, Nikola appears and begins to gradually show what he is still capable of. 11 and 4 points, 6 and 4 rebounds in 25 minutes, plus lit up Rakic season also at the World Junior Championships, where he gave out statistics very similar to the one that was shown to them in the local champion. 10-9 points plus 6 rebounds and 3 assists per game. As a result, Serbia becomes the silver medalist at that draw, and our hero today, together with the agent, takes the risky step of putting up his candidacy for the draft. At first glance, this decision could be called thoughtless. Statistics are not outstanding for a European player. The title of the MVP, champions of the EuroLeague and other things, as Donic later had, Nikola did not keep in his bosom. But then what was the main reason for such a serious step? There may actually be several answers, but the most frequent ones sound like this. The first. Back in the years when Nikola was 17 at the local championship, attention was drawn to him by Ognjen Stojakovic, who was an assistant head coach at the Nuggets, in fact, who later told Tim Connolly and K, president of basketball operations in Denver, that there was a unique boy in Serbia who could grow into a big basketball star in the future and that he needs to be closely monitored. Secondly, Mishka Raznatovic had considerable connections in the NBA. He was sure that his ward services would definitely be needed, and especially those teams where there was an acute shortage of big ones. And just the same, one of those teams was the Denver Nuggets. Third, let's combine the facts and you will get a rattling mixture of communication and a big chance for Nikola, in which his agent believed very strongly. There is a rumor that even the day before the draft, Connolly promised that Denver would select Jokic, but the truth is not in the first round, but in the second. However, against this background, many may have a question. And what could it be like that? Actually, no, probably not that. But still, why would Denver exchange their lottery pick for a player that they probably didn't need or maybe that didn't even suit them? But then Stojakovic intervenes in the case again, who convinces to look at the guy. After that, the front office really looks at the combination of skills of Pierre Stojakovic, Mark Gasoli and Dirk Nowitzki in the young Nikola. The truth bothered everyone, again, the physical form of the kid. But even here, in principle, the assistant coach sparred, showing the recordings of the games of young Gasol, Martin Gortat and Nikola Pkovic noticed the same shortcomings that Jokic had, that everyone was slow, lanky and not athletic basketball players and everything was fine after that they decided that it was possible to really write off the kid too early. Actually, the draft 2000 of the 14th year, under the 41st pick, the Denver Nuggets take a Serbian car for themselves and Nikola's story flows smoothly from Europe to NBC. This time we will not consider the draft lottery of the 14th year in more or less detail. The reason for such a skip is the fact that I have already voiced. The 41st pick, as promised by Connolly, was spent on Nikola, and I also allowed myself to do so, because Nikola did not get to NBA that year, deciding that he would stay in the Adriatic League for another season, well, also because, in principle, Denver also considered it necessary. He will pump his skills there a little bit and only after that he will try to move overseas. But in general, to be honest, there is simply nothing to show in it. During Nikola's choice of the director, the broadcast showed an advertisement for a fucking taco, which later became an extremely viral video, especially after the Serb took the MVP. Well, sort of figure it out, Denver's MVP is becoming a taco. Well, you know. Well, the reason for such a funny act, too, if anything, was weighty. Nikola did not even watch him during the broadcast of the draft. He was at home in Serbia and was fast asleep, and the news about the selection was told to him by his older brother, Attention, who woke up the little one to the sound of champagne opening with the words, "How can you fool even sleep at such a moment when you are being selected at the draft? Don't you even watch it?" And Nikola said no, he was just sleeping and tired after training. That's it. But let's go back to the fact that Nikola did not immediately start playing in the NBA. In general, with an eye to the past, this could be called unequivocally correct, since over the next season Jokic literally becomes the main sporting event in his homeland and the echoes of his game often reached even the American Twitter, where insiders assumed who Denver could still drag to his squad. In many ways, Nikola's breakthrough in statistics is due to the fact that Ratko Varda is leaving Megu, who also vacated the club's headliner place and allowed Jokic to start spending much more time on the court with his departure, and Nikola, in principle, skillfully took advantage of this chance. As a result, at the age of 19, our hero takes the MVP of the season for himself. Yes, his team was not even close to the winners, having won only the 10th place in the championship, but personally Jokic boosted his numbers very much, which became the main motivation of Denver to return the previously drafted young man to himself and give him a $4 million agreement. However, before that, there was still a chance for Nick to get to Barcelona, which for 2 years in a row looked at the Serb, was ready to conclude even an agreement with him, and at that time, the moment when the representatives of Barca arrived for the final negotiations and the final viewing of their possible future player, Nikola dumped out his worst match of the season and in general in the history of Mega. 4 points, a hole instead of protection, an almost stationary game. What did the representatives of the Catalans see then, and as a result, taking time to think, they never returned with a contract for the Ekich. Although perhaps it was for the best. Otherwise I'll play there somewhere in Barcelona, Dan Bay would never have made it. Figure out who we would have lost, guys. Now it's time to understand how Nikola showed himself as soon as he was in Mbappe. It all starts with the Summer League, where our hero, let's say, was not bad. He gives out 8 points, 6 and 2 rebounds, 1 and 4 assists, 1 and 4 blocks on average for all fights. Of course, yes, it was far from fiction, especially against the background of Kader, Jahlil Okafor and many others, but the main thing is that Connolly is still satisfied with such a performance of his newcomer, noting once again the unrealistic universalism of the Big One, but as before, in general, Denver's plans remained unchanged. Yusuf Nurkic, whom the Nuggets took earlier under the 16th pick of the same 14th draft, remains the main center of the team, and Ekik is a reserve. And here I would again like to step aside a little from Nikola's career path, explaining in general what kind of atmosphere prevailed in Denver at that